Thank you so much for anyone who's joining me live today. Also, to anyone who's watching the replay, I'm always so happy to have you all here and joining in and learning about your pain. I'm always so impressed when people are just always eager to learn everything that they can about their pain. Today, we are going to sort of talk a bit about neuroplastic pain and decode that. First, I do just want to say that if you're new to my world, or if this is your first live, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I have a specialty in chronic pain management. Even though I'm licensed as a psychologist, this is for informational and educational purposes only. It's not therapy, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Um, and you might find that I might be looking to the side today at my nose. I do prepare for these. I take them very seriously because there is a certain amount of education that I believe that every woman with chronic pain deserves to know. I also do have a group coaching program, and we go a lot deeper into the, okay, you've shared with me the what and the why, but like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And that's what we do in my group coaching program. But I do believe that everyone deserves to be able to get this up to date science on chronic pain that just isn't showing up at many of the doctor's appointments that we go to on a regular basis. So that's always what the purpose of these lives are. My mission has always been to just kind of get this information out to as many women as I can. Having been one myself, I understand and have felt what these doctor appointments can feel like and how disappointing that can be when you've tried it all and you keep going and you keep pushing and you just still feel like this hard work you're putting in really isn't amounting to much. So that's just a little bit of background for me. There is a replay of a live in the guide section of this group where I talk more about my story and how my approach and my philosophy evolved through that, as well as through my training as a pain psychologist. Today, we'll talk about decoding neuroplastic pain, and I will start by just saying we've talked about this before, that chronic pain is different than acute or short-term pain. It doesn't respond to the same treatments. It acts differently. Different parts of the brain are involved. We also know that most tissues in the body heal within 3 to 6 months, and when pain continues beyond that, it's often being maintained, at least in part, by the nervous system, the brain, and I'll sort of describe that a bit more. A great precursor to this live today is the one that I did last week, where we're talking about pain as an alarm system, so you might enjoy listening to that as well. All of the previous live trainings that I've done can be found there in that guide section. I want to start today by telling a story. It's my favorite pain story. It's a story that's used by many educators in chronic pain. I read it first in a book. It's called Painful Yarns by Lorimer Mosley. This is a lovely book. It's super short, thin. It doesn't take long to get through it. And it's full of metaphors and stories about how tricky pain can be. And I just think it's great for kind of grounding us in that this experience isn't our fault, that pain can be tricky, and we just need to understand why it works the way that it does. And we're learning so much more about this. But okay, so here's the story. I am going on and on. Here's the story. So the story is basically about a construction worker who jumped off of a building or off of a, like some sort of deck or landing, and he landed on a 6-inch nail. The nail went through his boot all the way out to the other side. He was in extreme, excruciating pain. They took him to the emergency room to get the nail removed. But when they took off his boot, they discovered that there was no blood, no wound, no injury at all. And the nail had actually gone between his toes. So he felt this pain in his body because he saw the nail go through his boot and had this threatening belief that he was injured because he had the visual, right? And the brain takes in all of the information that it receives, whether that's through our senses, what we see in this scenario, our memories, past experiences, our knowledge, kind of the way we feel in our bodies. It takes in all of the information that it can through all the receptors and sensors and receptors in our body, and it takes that information in and it processes that signal. It decides, what do I need to have this organism do? Because the brain's job is to protect us. And it processed, for this man, it processed that information, that visual of a nail going through his shoe, as it processed it as dangerous, and it created pain to protect him. And so this sort of process of the brain creating pain has been replicated as experiments and studies. It's replicated. We're trying to find out, can we predict pain? Can we trick the brain into feeling pain? And we've said this before, the brain does its best to predict the need for pain based on the information it has, but like us, it can't predict something with 100% certainty. The body can send normal signals to our brain. A normal signal is just something that we see in front of us, but sometimes the brain processes those signals as a need for protection or a need for pain. And sometimes the brain predicts wrong, and then that pattern can stick in some people. So the brain's really good at learning new helpful and adaptive skills. From an evolutionary standpoint, the brain, the nervous system, is always adapting and changing based on experience to get better at protecting us. But the brain is also good at learning bad habits that way, especially when there's repetition. So when the brain experiences pain repeatedly, as it may if you've had pain for months, years, decades, I've met people with pain for decades. When the brain experiences pain repeatedly, the neurons that are involved, that fire together, they become more wired together, more strongly wired together. And they pair up and they get better and better at firing together at the same time. And that literally means that the brain can get better at creating pain and at feeling pain. And the brain changes in a way that reinforces pain or is more likely to make it happen. And then the condition can become chronic. And it's an accident, right? You didn't do this to yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't not follow some advice or not seek the right treatment. This is an accident. Your brain has accidentally learned how to be in pain chronically. And the neuro in what we're talking about today in neuroplastic pain refers to the brain and other parts of the nervous system. The word plastic means to adapt, to change, to develop. So think about melting plastic and how we can shape it into different shapes. Neuroplastic pain is different. This is where the pain can get stuck because of repetition and because your brain learned it really well. And this is really hard. I've talked to so many women, so many men too, at different stages of understanding their pain, some very skeptical about this. And this knowing that even though we feel pain in our body, it's an experience created by the brain, is really hard to sort of wrap our head around or accept. Our brain's responsible for the experience of pain based on all of the information it takes in. It kind of decodes that information and determines, what do I need to do to protect my person. And so our brains are so powerful and so complex that they can not only cause pain, but they can actually keep it going. And so there are so many experiences that can include all areas of the body that can be a result of something neuroplastic, something that's being continued in a neuroplastic way. Headaches, stomach pain, pelvic pain, joint pain, nerve pain, IBS, these can all be part of this neuroplastic picture. And so many neuroplastic cases look very similar. Person has physical symptoms in their bodies, but physical treatments don't help. When they reset their alarm system, their brain's protective system, they can finally feel relief. And so this does not mean that pain is not real. It does not mean that your pain is not real. All pain is real. Any pain we feel in our body is real. And that experience, that diagnosis, that term, neuroplastic pain, it can start at different times and for different reasons and from different starting points. So I've met people that were in a car accident and they had an injury, and that injury healed, and then they continued to have pain after that, neuroplastic pain where their brain was keeping it going. Or they had an injury in a car accident and that injury didn't fully heal. They did surgery and they sort of fixed the hardware, but maybe it didn't fully heal, or maybe something was still like amiss structurally in the body, but the brain was amplifying that and keeping pain going, and the body was becoming more sensitive, making pain more likely to happen more readily or more easily. I've met people with diseases that will always have this autoimmune or systemic disease, And on top of that, the brain is amplifying, the brain has become overprotective and making it so much harder for them to feel less pain. I've met people who had very difficult childhoods and their pain just kind of showed up. Nothing on scans, nothing on imaging. Their brain decided, I need to protect you in this way, and then it kept doing it. Or someone who went through a particularly stressful time in adulthood, and that's when their pain started. For me personally, I had it's sort of like a whiplash type injury, but I had it within the context of a really stressful time of my life, a toxic work environment, and other just sort of life stressors that were happening at the time. And I think that context set my body up to, and my brain to be protective and to keep pain going. So there isn't a right way to get this. There isn't anything that makes your pain less real. This can happen to anyone with a diagnosis or an injury or systemic issue in their body. And that's not to say, you know, like if you don't have an injury or a quote reason for it, that this isn't real. For whatever reason, the only thing that matters, it's like the diagnosis matters less. The old injury matters less. At this point in time, after 6 months or more, if you are continuing to have this long-standing pain, your body feels like it's becoming more and more sensitive. What matters now is that your brain has decided that I need to produce pain to protect this person. We need to figure out why your brain is still doing that or why it's being overprotective. When people are skeptical about this, I think, the pieces that I need to see falling into place before they can sort of fully embrace the idea of neuroplastic pain. First is to understand biology, um, just how the brain works, what the brain's job is, what the receptors in our body's job is, and how pain is just physically created in the body in the form of an alarm system designed to protect us. The second thing that helps people fall into a more acceptance of neuroplastic pain is just understanding evolution and adaptation, that our brains are built to adapt to new experiences. This can take us down a very positive road, or it can take us down a really difficult road, and our brains can form connections that are unhelpful. And for the case with people who have pain that just won't go away, this is oftentimes our brain kind of going down this difficult or more darker side of neuroplasticity. And then the last thing is that, I think it's important to understand the context of our medical system, the healthcare system, and how it approaches pain, how our doctors are trained to approach pain, where they spend, we spend, and our culture spends a lot of time focusing on treating a condition. And your doctors are trained to do it this way, to treat a condition by finding a structural cause for pain in the body, zone in on it, and then fix it. It's so helpful for acute injuries, but it hurts more than it really helps for chronic pain. And so when we get medical ideas about why we still have pain and the language that comes with it, then the diagnoses that come with it, it can reinforce the idea that something is still really physically wrong in our body. We are not safe. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe our brain is producing more and more pain in order to protect us, and that's amplifying anything else that might be there. But it's sort of that threat that can be evoked in those situations. So that's just a little bit of background on neuroplastic pain. If you're curious whether or not you have neuroplastic pain or it might be showing up for you, I'm just going to share some, a list of questions, right, that you might ask yourself to learn that. So, one thing you can ask yourself is whether you've gotten relief from medical approaches and treatments. And if you have, was it just temporary? Was it slightly ineffective? Just kind of thinking about how much relief you've really gotten from conventional approaches that you've tried in the past. Thinking about, was there an injury that preceded your pain? Um, if there wasn't an injury, this is a sign that it could be very much neuroplastic. When doctors say they can't find a cause or they can't see the reason for the pain anymore, this is another strong indicator. Many people will have been given a diagnosis. That happens a lot too. Doctors are sort of trained to look for the cause and provide a diagnosis so that they have something to treat. Um, so you may have a diagnosis on top of this. Maybe you've heard someone say, we can't find anything wrong. And I know that's probably the most difficult thing that we can hear as a person with chronic pain. I would like us to flip that when we're talking about neuroplastic pain, because what that actually means is that even though this is a difficult experience, now we're in a really empowering position because now we know that if they aren't seeing anything like a structural, like I broke my arm and that's what's triggering this pain to start, right? Then I might have this neuroplastic pain. Both real. Broken arms real pain, neuroplastic pain is real pain. Maybe you have neuropathic pain or nerve damage. You can have all kinds of diagnoses and types of pain, and they can coexist. They can exist together or they can exist separately. Let's see what else is on my list here. If there was an injury that preceded your pain, where there really was something they saw on a scan, it can become neuroplastic pain. So, again, our tissues typically heal within 3 to 6 months. And beyond that, our brain can really, because there's been so much pain repetition, our brains can become better at creating pain. Also, think about, did your pain come on during a stressful time of your life? That might be adulthood or childhood. When we have stress, our brain's on high alert and it's more protective and it can trigger pain. So that's one sign pointing to neuroplastic pain. Have you had pain in multiple locations in your body? So, assuming your doctor's ruled out systemic disorders of some kind or any red flags, um, having multiple locations in your body or pain that has become more widespread or that changes location might be another sign of neuroplastic pain. So kind of that inconsistency. Is the pain inconsistent in terms of where it is, when it appears, how severe it is? Maybe it shows up sometimes and not others. Maybe sometimes you're doing a certain activity and pain is low, and the next day you do it again and it's high. Um, Inconsistency is also a sign that neuroplasticity could be keeping your pain going, because when pain is structurally generated from an injury, like if I have just broken my arm, there's not a lot of variation in how I experience that. That's not shifting to different parts of my body. It's probably not becoming too widespread. If I have acute structural injury damage, there's not a lot of variation that comes with that. Um, Sometimes people will say that their pain is symmetrical, it's happening on both sides of their body. And again, that would be different, right, than an acute injury where there's just sort of this one part, one side of the body. Maybe delayed pain is also another sign. So, another thing that might be less accessible for you, but how often do you think about your pain? Are you aware of how often you think about it? Do you worry about it throughout the day? Is there some level of threat associated with it for you? And most of the time, the answer is yes, right? Having pain every day isn't fun. It hurts and it is threatening, right? It threatens everything that makes us who we are. But beyond that, how much are you thinking about it and worrying about it and avoiding things because of it during the day? That's another thing that might trigger you to think about, okay, my brain's really trying to protect me a lot. And that's a sign of neuroplastic pain. And then I'm just throwing this out there because I work so closely with women who have these tendencies. There are really common personality traits in individuals with neuroplastic pain: perfectionism, people pleasing, kind of the high achiever type A, conscientiousness, anxiousness, and generally sort of patterns of self-criticism, high expectation, having a lot of pressure on yourself, worrying. So these things that would naturally put our brain on high alert can also be associated with neuroplastic pain. And so, if this were a checklist, you need 3 out of this checklist in order to say you have neuroplastic pain. That's not really how it works. If you're saying yes to one or more of these things, I would say consider the fact that neuroplastic pain might be making your experience worse, or it might be why you have pain, or it might be keeping your pain going longer than you really want it to go. If you feel like none of these apply to you, I also might want to point out that it's still possible you have neuroplastic pain. It can be really tricky. It can be good at showing up in the same way that a structurally caused pain issue would show up sometimes. Just to say that, and to pull this all together, I think the main thing to remember is that when the brain believes the body is damaged or there's a threat, it will create pain to protect you. When we believe that the pain is due to our brain making a mistake, it just is getting a little bit too protective. It's like, oh, I wonder if she's here today, my Midwest mother, who reminds me every time I'm driving that oh, watch out for the rain, watch out for the snow. Are you sure you want to drive on your own? And it's a little more protective than I might need all the time, though I'm grateful that I have a mother who cares and wants to protect me, as well as we are grateful for this brain that does so much to protect us in our day-to-day lives. Sorry, Mom, I do love your protectiveness, but it's a great example when we're talking about overprotectiveness. When we believe that the pain is due to our brain making a mistake and that our body is safe, that threat actually goes away. And eventually, as threat goes down, the pain can start to fade away too. I hope this gives you some food for thought. Neuroplastic pain is the type of pain that responds really well to the type of approaches that I use. Um, I do have a group coaching program. It's a 3-month program. Women can come in and just get this all encompassing approach to dealing with neuroplastic pain. And I have guest speakers coming in. And actually, this week, I have a doctor of physical therapy coming in talking about this transformation zone for movement. So, thinking about interoception, mind body awareness, knowing where you are in this transformation from moving with pain to moving without. She's going to talk to them about how body maps are altered, how there can be this mind body disconnect over time, and teaching how to sharpen these maps so that our brain gets a little bit more accurate in its predictions. She's also going to be talk to them about the idea of moving the nerves versus moving the muscle at the tail end of all of that. And so these are the type of guest speaker opportunities that I provide for the women in my course. And I'd love for you to consider if all of this sounds just a little bit too familiar and you'd love to learn how to put this all together and come up with a plan for what do I do every day throughout the day. If you want to get into the nitty gritty of your day and figure out how do I turn down this protectiveness of my brain, this is the program for you. So feel free to comment ready in the chat box for this live presentation. You're always welcome to DM me. I am here for you. I genuinely am here to support all of you on your journey. But if you are ready and this is something you're considering, we can hop on a call as soon as this week. So just reach out and I'll send you my schedule. Otherwise, I guess that's it for today. Please remember that these everyday moments are moments that can heal you. Remember to be kind to yourselves. This is not your fault. Remember that here you are believed. I believe you. All pain is real. I believe your pain exists exactly as you are describing it. And I want to help you learn how to retrain that pain, retrain the brain, and get your life back. And that's why I'm here, is to just kind of spread this education. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, be kind to yourselves today, and I'll talk to you soon. Actually, wait. Oh, now I can finally see I'm not going yet. I can finally see the chat. It wasn't showing up before. I just want to read through, make sure there's, yeah, and I think we're still learning about long COVID. Someone was asking about long COVID and the things that build up with that. And I can say I don't necessarily treat long COVID, right? That's not what I'm doing. I'm not treating a medical disorder, but I believe that over time the threat with that condition just continues to build, right? Because it continues to go on, nothing is working. Now these new things are popping up that can be really threatening. And so that doesn't take away from the diagnosis of long COVID or the realness of the pain, but it does say that, hey, is my brain getting better at protecting me and at creating pain because this is continuing long term? And so this is where some of this might be helpful in dialing that down a bit. And medical gaslighting, this is such a difficult experience, medical gaslighting. And and I talk about this so many in some of my earlier lives where I think these experiences at the doctor, whether it's being dismissed, validated, if you feel like you were truly gaslighted, and even the well-intentioned diagnoses, the name, bone spur, herniated disc, bulging disc, deteriorating spine, the language sometimes too that we get in those appointments can be so threatening to us. And I've told my story before. The word that still I think about sometimes, bulging disc. Bulging disc is literally one of the most common things that can show up in the spine. It doesn't produce pain for every person. I don't even know, and she doesn't even know if that's why I had my neck pain. But the word, right? The showing of the x-ray images all of this stuff can produce threat just naturally because it's scary. And I remember that word bulging disc, and I jumped to worst case scenario. I'm a psychologist and I should be better at keeping myself from jumping to worst case scenario. But back when this happened, I jumped to the worst case scenario right away. This is only going to get worse as I get older. I'm so young. What will this look like when I'm so much older and I'm a grandparent? My kids are all grown up. Will I be able to? And like your mind can really just go from there. Some of that can be so threatening. So whether it's medical gaslighting or just like the well-intentioned language that was used to help you in your appointments, some of that can really stick with us in a threatening way in our bodies. And then I have another comment here that says, it only hurts when I think about it, but I think about it a lot. And, you know, I've talked about this before too, that I think the chronic pain space is really saturated with a lot of people with very specific expertise. And sometimes one of the things they'll put down about psychologists is that, we make it all about our thoughts and our mindset, and it's all about positive thinking. And I promise you, I didn't go through all of that school just to tell people to think more positively. But, and it's true. What we think impacts how we feel in our body. That can be proven by common sense. You can imagine that you are at a beach and your body will feel differently, even though you're not actually at a beach. Your brain doesn't know the difference, right? It just knows that there's something there and it's changing your body's experience based on what you're thinking about. So the way we think does in fact impact how we feel in our body. It's not possible to disconnect the mind and the body because they're unquestionably connected. There's robust research to suggest that shows that when we are having negative or worst case scenario thoughts about our pain, it can make pain intensity much higher. Pain can become more spread. There's more disability, there's more fear, there's less activity, more isolation, more depression. And so there's a very clear connection between how we think about our pain, how our brain that becomes part of the information that it's using to decide if it needs to protect us and how much it needs to protect us. So that can come in the form of ruminating, thinking about it a lot. It can come in the form of worst case scenario thinking. It can come in the form of just kind of magnifying that sort of one thing happens, but we think about it in this really big way. Yeah, and a lot of these language, like Yvette, that you're bringing up, when we're told that women perceive pain differently, that we make too much of it. This happens for men and women, that the way we think about our pain can dial it up. It's just one of the things, one of many things that dials it up. And so not only does it feel really invalidating to be told that, and it adds to distress and threat, but it turns up our pain. So all of these things are connected. That's why I try to put together information that's kind of all encompassing, that it really takes from all of these different areas of health and experience. And I think the most important thing is your experience. So for you, where does the threat get dialed up? Why does the brain believe it needs to protect you more than it really needs to? So we'll continue to explore this. I thank you all so much for coming today, and always reach out if you have questions, and certainly reach out if you want to come up with a more personalized strategy to get at the neuroplastic pain for you. Okay, talk to you all soon.